she said, "Do you believe me?" And I said, "Yes, I believe you." And that was the change.
When The Cosby Show first aired in 1984, it was unlike anything television audiences had seen before. At a time when many sitcoms focused on slapstick humor or working-class struggles, this show presented viewers with the Huxtables, an upper-middle-class African-American family living in Brooklyn Heights. The father, Dr. Heathcliff Huxtable, was a successful obstetrician, and the mother, Claire, was a strong and stylish lawyer. Together, they raised 5 children: Sandra, Denise, Theo, Vanessa, and Rudian, a home filled with humor, warmth, and valuable life lessons. The series quickly became a massive success, topping ratings charts and winning the hearts of millions. It reshaped how black families were shown on TV, offering an aspirational and positive image that broke long-standing stereotypes. For 8 seasons, from 1984 to 1992, The Cosby Show was more than just entertainment. It was a cultural touchstone. It influenced fashion, popular sayings, and even the way other sitcoms were made. However, as perfect as everything seemed on screen, the behind-the-scenes reality was far more complicated. Over the years, several actors either left the show or saw their roles reduced, sparking questions that fans continued to ask long after the show ended. Why did these actors leave a program that was so successful and beloved? The answers are not simple, but they reveal a mix of personal struggles, creative disagreements, and the overwhelming influence of Bill Cosby himself, who was not only the star but also the central force behind the show. Perhaps the most talked about departure from The Cosby Show was that of Lisa Bonet, who played Denise Huxtable, the free-spirited second daughter. Denise was one of the show's most popular characters, admired for her unique style, rebellious streak, and cool personality. She stood out from her more traditional siblings, and fans, especially young viewers, saw her as a role model for independence and creativity. Off-screen, Lisa Bonet shared much of that same independent energy. She was determined to be more than just the girl next door, and she wanted to explore roles that challenged her as an actress. This created tension with Bill Cosby, who had very strict ideas about how the actors on his show should behave and what kind of image they should maintain. Cosby believed the Huxtables were not just fictional characters but representatives of a higher standard. He wanted the cast, especially the younger actors, to reflect the wholesome family values of the show in their real lives. This controlling environment soon clashed with Bonet's artistic ambitions. The breaking point came in 1987, when Bonet accepted a role in the film Angel Heart. The movie was dark, mysterious, and included controversial content, including violent scenes and an explicit sex scene. For Bonet, it was an exciting opportunity to prove her range as a serious actress. For Cosby, it was a betrayal. He feared that Denise Huxtable, beloved by families across America, appearing in such a film would damage the show's carefully built image. This clash between Cosby's desire for control and Bonet's desire for independence would define their working relationship from that point forward. Instead of completely cutting ties after the Angel Heart controversy, producers tried to find a middle ground. In 1987, Lisa Bonet was given her own spin-off series, A Different World. The show followed Denise Huxtable as she entered college at Hillman, a fictional historically black university. At first, the new series seemed like the perfect compromise. It allowed Bonet to keep playing Denise, while also removing her from the daily environment of The Cosby Show set, where tensions with Cosby were high. The spin-off also gave her a chance to shine as a leading character. However, problems soon followed. During the first season, Bonet married musician Lenny Kravitz and later became pregnant with their daughter. So producers suggested writing Denise's pregnancy into the storyline, portraying her as a young single mother in college, but Cosby rejected this idea completely. He believed it would harm the image of the Huxtables and send the wrong message to young audiences. For him, Denise could not be an unwed mother. It did not fit the perfect family picture he wanted to maintain. As a result, Bonet was written out of A Different World after the first season. Official statements claimed creative differences, but the truth was much more personal. Bonet wanted her real-life changes to be reflected on screen, while Cosby wanted to keep his fictional world free of anything he thought might seem negative. Interestingly, after being dropped from A Different World, Bonet returned to The Cosby Show in 1989. Her character Denise was reintroduced as a married woman who had traveled to Africa and returned with a husband and stepdaughter. This storyline conveniently avoided the pregnancy issue and brought back a fan favorite. However, the underlying tensions between Bonet and Cosby never disappeared, leading to her permanent exit in 1991. Another actor whose time on the show was filled with difficulties was Joseph C. Phillips, who played Martin Kendall, Denise's husband. Introduced in season 6, Martin was a responsible naval officer and stepfather to Olivia, played by the young Raven Simone. At first, his addition to the show seemed like a great move, bringing fresh storylines and new family dynamics. But behind the scenes, Phillips later revealed that his experience was frustrating and often humiliating. He described Lisa Bonet as distant and unprofessional during their time working together. According to him, she would arrive late, mumble her lines, and show little interest in her role. This made it difficult for him to create believable chemistry with her on screen. If working with Bonet was challenging, working under Bill Cosby was worse. Phillips admired Cosby before joining the show, seeing him as a trailblazer and role model. However, once on set, he witnessed a different side. Cosby was known for his strict control and could be harsh with actors. Phillips recalled an incident where Cosby publicly scolded him in front of the cast, crew, and live audience for a line reading he disliked. The experience left Phillips embarrassed and fearful, as if he was walking on eggshells. Over time, his role was reduced, with writers often explaining Martin's absence by saying he was away on naval duty. By the final season, Phillips appeared in only a few episodes. Though he was not formally fired, the message was clear: his character was no longer important to the show. Phillips later admitted he felt relieved when the show ended, as the environment had become too toxic for him to continue. Unlike Bonet and Phillips, Sabrina LaBeouf, who played the eldest Huxtable daughter, Sandra, did not leave the show under dramatic circumstances. Still, her role offers insight into how the show's focus shifted over time. Sandra was introduced as the successful, responsible, older daughter studying at Princeton. She was intelligent, mature, and often acted as a guiding voice for her younger siblings. Yet, she was not as central to the series as the other children, partly because she was older and away at college. Over the years, her appearances became less frequent when she married Elvin Thibodeau, played by Jeffrey Owens, and started her own family. Her character naturally drifted into the background. This was partly a narrative choice. The Cosby Show centered on Cliff and Claire, raising children still living at home, not adult kids with families of their own. But some behind-the-scenes details suggest Sandra's role may also have been limited by casting doubts. Bill Cosby reportedly hesitated to cast LaBeouf in the first place because he felt she looked too mature to play Felicia Rashad's daughter, as the actresses were only about 10 years apart in age. Despite this, LaBeouf stayed on the show until the end, though her storylines were less prominent than those of Denise, Theo, or Vanessa. After the series, LaBeouf focused on theater work rather than chasing more TV fame. Her departure from the spotlight was not fueled by conflict, but by personal choice and the natural fading of her character within the show's central story. Jeffrey Owens, who played Sandra's husband, Elvin, also experienced the long-lasting effects of being part of The Cosby Show. Elvin started as a somewhat chauvinistic character, often clashing with Claire Huxtable over gender roles. Over time, however, he became a more likable and loving husband and father, adding humor and warmth to the series. Owens remained with the show until its finale, making him one of the few recurring actors who did not leave early. But his story took an interesting turn years after the show ended. In 2018, photos of Owens working at a Trader Joe's in New Jersey went viral. Some media outlets framed it as a fall from grace, implying that a former TV star had been reduced to taking an ordinary job. However, the public reaction was largely supportive. Fellow actors and fans praised him for earning an honest living and reminded the world that acting is an unstable career. Owens himself explained in interviews that the job gave him flexibility to audition for acting roles while supporting his family. The publicity even led to new acting opportunities, including roles in projects by Tyler Perry. Owens' experience highlighted an important truth. Even actors from hugely successful shows often struggle to find steady work once the spotlight fades. For many, the fame is temporary, but the need to make a living remains. His story may not have been one of conflict with Cosby or the show itself, but it revealed another challenge actors face once a hit series comes to an end. Looking at all these stories together, Lisa Bond's clashes, Joseph C. Phillips's disillusionment, Sabrina LaBeouf's quiet fade, and Jeffrey Owens' career challenges, a common thread becomes clear: Bill Cosby's overwhelming influence. As the star, creator, and driving force of the show, Cosby set the tone, both on and off screen. He demanded that the actors not only perform their roles but also live up to the values he wanted the Huxtables to represent. For Cosby, the show was more than entertainment, it was a cultural statement. While this vision made the show groundbreaking, it also created a controlling environment. Cosby's refusal to allow Bond's pregnancy storyline, his harsh treatment of Phillips, and his careful management of the show's image all point to a leader who tolerated little deviation from his plan. In some cases, like LaBeouf's, the actors simply accepted their role fading. In others, like Bones, the conflict was open and painful. Either way, Cosby's authority was the defining factor in who stayed, who left, and how their characters were portrayed. The reasons why actors left The Cosby Show are not just about contracts or simple disagreements. They are stories about control, independence, and the struggles actors face when their personal growth collides with the rigid expectations of a show. Lisa Bonet wanted to explore serious acting and live her truth, but Cosby's vision didn't allow it. Joseph C. Phillips discovered that working with his idol came at the cost of dignity and respect. Sabrina LeBeau found herself sidelined as the show focused on younger children, while Jeffrey Owens learned that fame does not guarantee long-term stability. Together, these stories revealed the reality behind a show that seemed picture-perfect. The Cosby Show gave audiences laughter, warmth, and a positive image of family life. But behind the camera, it was a workplace shaped by power struggles, personal choices, and sometimes painful sacrifices. In the end, the actors who left did so for deeply human reasons: conflict, ambition, exhaustion, or simply life moving in a new direction. Their stories remind us that the polished image on screen often hides a much more complicated truth. And today, understanding why these actors left adds another important layer to the legacy of one of television's most famous shows. One of the brightest additions to The Cosby Show was Raven, who joined the series in 1989 as Olivia Kendall, the stepdaughter of Denise's husband, Martin. Barely 3 years old when she first appeared, Raven instantly captured the audience's hearts with her charm, wit, and impressive comedic timing. Her character became so popular that she often stole scenes from the older children, keeping the show fresh during its later seasons. However, being a child star on such a high-profile show came with unique pressures. Raven has spoken in later interviews about how she was shielded from many of the conflicts on set due to her age. But she also experienced the intensity of growing up in front of millions of viewers. After The Cosby Show ended, she transitioned to other successful projects, most notably Disney's That's So Raven. Yet, like many child stars, she also faced the challenge of carving out her own identity after being associated with a beloved role from such a young age. Raven's departure from the show was natural. She aged out of her role as the series concluded, but her experience highlights another truth. Child actors on hit shows often have to carry the weight of fame long before they are emotionally ready for it. While Raven turned out to be one of the lucky ones who successfully built a career beyond her child star fame, many others from similar shows did not. In her case, leaving The Cosby Show wasn't about conflict but about growing up and moving on to new chapters. Her story serves as a softer contrast to the more dramatic exits of Lisa Bonet and Joseph C. Phillips. Tempest Bledsoe, who played Vanessa Huxtable, represents a different kind of actor experience on the show. Vanessa was the fourth child, often portrayed as dramatic, stubborn, and full of teenage angst. She provided comic relief in her own way, especially in storylines about high school crushes, bad choices, and youthful mistakes. Unlike some of her Bledsoe stayed on the show until its very end, in 1992. However, once the series wrapped up, she faced the type of career challenge many sitcom stars encounter: breaking free from the shadow of a famous character. For years, casting directors continued to see her as Vanessa Huxtable, making it difficult to land roles that showcased her range. Bledsoe did appear in guest roles on other television series, hosted a daytime talk show in the 1990s, and later participated in reality TV projects, but she never reached the same level of fame as she did during The Cosby Show. Importantly, she never spoke publicly of conflict with Cosby or the production, suggesting her experience on the show was relatively smooth compared to some of her Still, her story underscores how leaving a popular sitcom often leaves actors with the burden of typecasting. Audiences loved her as Vanessa, but that love also limited how the industry saw her. For Bledsoe, moving beyond The Cosby Show required patience, persistence, and acceptance that fame doesn't always follow even the most recognizable faces. She stayed away from scandal and controversy, choosing a quieter path than many of her peers. Her departure, then, was less dramatic but just as telling. Sometimes leaving a great show simply means adjusting to a career where lightning doesn't always strike twice. Malcolm Jamal Warner, who played Theo Huxtable, was arguably one of the show's breakout stars. Theo, the only son in the Huxtable household, was relatable to countless viewers as he struggled with school, relationships, and figuring out who he was. Warner's natural charisma and comedic talent made him a fan favorite, and his storylines often carried emotional weights, such as when Theo was revealed to have dyslexia, a groundbreaking moment for TV representation. Unlike Lisa Bonet or Joseph C. Phillips, Warner didn't clash publicly with Cosby and remained with the show until the end. Yet, Warner faced his own struggles after leaving. Much like Tempest Bledsoe, he dealt with typecasting, often being seen as Theo rather than as a versatile actor. Warner did continue acting, appearing in TV dramas, guest roles, and later in shows like Suits and The Resident. He also explored directing, poetry, and music. However, the shadow of The Cosby Show loomed over his career for decades, especially after Cosby's later controversies damaged the show's legacy. In interviews, Warner has been candid about the emotional burden of watching his life's biggest accomplishment become tainted by the scandals surrounding Cosby. For Warner, leaving The Cosby Show wasn't about walking away, but about learning how to carry the weight of a role that both opened doors and closed them. His story reflects